welcome back to another Forza Horizon 5 graphics settings video. If you haven't already watched my previous video, you should check it out before this one. I'll post the link below in the description. Today I'm going to be going through each one of the graphics options in the game and looking into what actually happens in the game when you change the settings, as opposed to using the benchmark for most of the comparisons. A lot of videos are focused around pushing more FPS out of your hardware, but they don't always show you what happens to your visuals when you make those configuration changes. They'll just tell you to change various settings to get more FPS. In this video, I'll be deep diving into those settings and I'll be showing you many of the in-game changes that happen as you alter your visual quality settings. I hope this video will help you make a more informed choice about the settings you change as you're tweaking your graphics settings, and if you're finished tweaking your graphics settings, then maybe you just might like to watch along out of curiosity. Just keep in mind, this is not an FPS guide, it's a guide to help you understand what the graphics settings actually change in the game as you adjust them. I haven't documented every single change, as I'm sure there's a lot that I've missed. If you do know of any things I've missed, write them in the video comments, and if we can get enough of them together, then maybe I can make a part 2 of this video and document all of those. I'm also thinking about making another video which combines all of the information in this one with a guide about what I think the best visuals/FPS settings are for a range of cards. I've got a few more cards on hand now that I can test with. Let me know in the comments if you think I should make that video. Finally, sometimes the screens compare 2 quality options at a time, sometimes they compare more. It just depends how much of a scene I had to show so you can clearly see what changes. Sometimes I just have to show more of an area to demonstrate the changes properly. I'll go through these settings in the order that they appear in the menu in-game. If you like this kind of content and you enjoy the video or find it helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon so you get notified when my videos drop, and or hit the like button. I'll be doing a lot more technical content like this in the future, and I'll also be doing some driving vids. Let's get started. First up is Anisotropic Filtering. This setting controls the quality that some textures get rendered at and also the quality that they get rendered at the further they are in the distance. This option applies particularly heavy to roads in the game. There's 3 options: high, medium, and low. If you focus on the area where the red square is on each picture, look at the quality of the dirt road and the cobblestones. You can see on the high quality setting, the dirt road texture has a high level of clarity, and as you get to the end of the road in the distance, it doesn't appear noticeably blurred. Now look at the same dirt road on medium. You can clearly see the quality of the texture overall is lower, and as you look into the distance, you can see the texture is blurred down near the end of the road. You can also clearly see the cobblestone texture has dropped in quality, and in the distance you can see the cobblestone is blurred more. On low, the whole dirt texture is lower quality, even up closer, and in the distance on both the cobblestone and dirt road, you can see the texture is blurred the most. Shadow quality controls the quality of the shadows from objects and cars that you see in the game. I'm using the picture from my previous video here because it shows the quality of shadows very well. There's 5 options for shadow quality: extreme, ultra, high, low, and off. Look at the fence on the left of the screen. You can see the diminishing shadow quality as the settings lower. You can also see this on the shadow on the right side of the car. A few people noted on my last video that they prefer the shadow quality setting around high or low because they feel it looks more natural. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a subjective thing and everyone has a personal preference to what they like. Night shadows controls the shadows on objects at night. There's 2 options: on and off. Watch the left side of the car as it drives down the drag strip. The 2 videos are not in sync, so the areas will show at different times, but you'll see as the car drives under the lights on the right hand side, a shadow will cast from the car on the left side of the car. In the video where the setting is off, there's no shadow on the car. You can also compare this at the end of the section. As the car drives in circles, you'll see the shadow on one of the cars, but not on the other. Motion blur quality controls the quality of motion blur in the game as you're driving fast. It's not the amount of motion blur you see, it's the quality of that motion blur, if that makes sense. A higher setting doesn't give you more blur, it's just a more realistic effect. There's 4 options: ultra, high, medium, and low. Quality comparing this one is a little tricky, but I managed to get it pretty accurately. I started at the same spot on each setting option and I drove down the drag strip, then I pulled a still frame at the same location from each video. The motion blur in ultra looks pretty good. It looks like a fairly realistic motion effect. I can tell the difference between high and medium, but in game when you're going fast, I don't think there's any way anyone will be able to tell the difference. All 3 of those settings look pretty good. I'm not really sure if any of them looks better than the others though. Low's completely different. There's obviously a different type of motion blur effect going on when it's set to low. Even then, I'm not sure you'll notice it when you're speeding down the highway. Environmental texture quality is a little bit complex, and I need to reference the next setting as well to explain this one properly. So I'm going to skip environmental texture quality for now, and I'll talk about environmental geometry quality next, and then I'll come back to texture quality. I found environmental geometry quality relates more to the quantity/density of objects in the game rather than an actual drop in visual quality of those objects. For example, a crowd will have less people in it, but the quality of the people in the crowd will stay the same across all settings. There's 6 options: extreme, ultra, high, medium, low, and very low. I just want to point out that this is one of those particular settings that it's a massive pain to test because you have to restart the game between changes. Then you have to travel back to the location you're testing at and hope that the lighting doesn't change too much or that it turns dark before you finish capturing the video needed. There's a few settings like this. Sorry, I just had to vent. First up is extreme versus ultra. In this scene, you can see there's a really big density drop in the visible objects when you go from extreme to ultra. This is probably one of the few settings in the game where there's such a big change between the 2 top settings. There's a lot less hedge around and some of the plants are missing. There's also less grass on the ground. Next, high versus medium. The quantity of things stays the same between these 2 settings, but the hedge and the plants just seems to be slightly less thick. It's really subtle to see. The grass has lost a small amount of density on medium versus high as well. Finally, low versus very low. The only real difference I can see here is less grass on very low. There's a second scene to showcase something else this setting affects, and that's the crowd density. If you look at the 3 options on screen now, extreme, ultra, and high, you can see that as you go down in quality, the crowd has less people in it. As I mentioned earlier, the crowd models don't seem to drop in quality, there's just less of them. Medium, low, and very low show a continued drop in crowd numbers. There's a big difference between extreme and low. Also, I just want to give a shout out to the guy circled in red on the left. He's been pumped all day in the exact same spot. He's there in extreme as well. You can just see his arm and hat. What a trooper. Now that you understand what environmental geometry quality does, let's go back to environmental texture quality. There's 5 options: extreme, ultra, high, medium, and low. So this setting should control the quality of textures in the game, things like trees, general building textures, etc. But this one's a little interesting because when I ran through the settings and looked at the recorded footage, I noticed that for some reason what was supposed to be ultra looked bad, really bad. It looked much worse than even low did. Check out the quality of the vines hanging from the roof and the stone wall texture. It's low resolution. Of course, I thought somehow I'd made a mistake, so I reran the test and it was definitely correct. I was able to reproduce the results. Ultra just looks comparatively bad. I figured it must be a bug and the settings must have got mixed up because what ultra looks like is really the worst by far, and that's what low should really look like. But then as I was investigating more, I decided to look at another scene between extreme and ultra, and it was the same. You can clearly see the leaves on the tree with the ultra setting look pretty low quality, so I'd just say it's a bug. Things get a little more complex here. When you set environmental texture quality to high, the game forces the environmental geometry quality setting down to high as well. You can't change this. It's fixed within the game. We know this will cause us to have less of the hedges in the scene because we talked about that in the previous section. So if we compare the ultra bad looking scene to the next quality level down, which is high, see how it looks? High may have less objects in the scene, but the quality of what's there is significantly higher than ultra. This doesn't make sense to me. Why have extreme, which has maximum detail, maximum objects, then ultra, which has the same max amount of objects but at a much lower quality, and then high, which has a lower amount of objects in the scene but back at a higher quality? Why not just scale the settings linearly like every single other setting in the game? The lower you go, the worse it looks. It breaks my brain, but I think I might know what's going on here. Now, I base this on absolutely nothing and could be completely wrong, but I have a feeling this ultra setting might be a graphics profile for the Xbox system. I could be completely wrong. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, or if you know the answer to this, let us know. If you look at the building and compare the maximum extreme setting, skipping ultra, and go down to high, you lose the vine hanging from the roof, but that fits with the forced geometry downgraded setting where you lose some objects from the scene, but you still maintain a fairly high level of quality. Nothing like the ultra profile. Maybe it's so you can say that the Xbox runs at ultra level of the PC? Who knows? Anyways, enough rambling about that. You can see the side-by-side comparison now on extreme and ultra. Never use ultra environmental texture quality. That's the takeaway. Then we have high, medium, and low side by side. I don't really see much different between the 3 in this scene. Maybe high has a slightly higher clarity on the textures in the tree and the grass is a little bit better quality. Multi-sample anti-aliasing, or MSAA, has 4 settings: 8x, 4x, 2x, and off. This is the game's main anti-aliasing method, and it's responsible for taking care of the jagged edges on 3D objects. This setting has a larger visible effect at 1440p and lower resolution. At 4K, the effects of this setting are less visible, but you should definitely still use it if your GPU has the power. It's a pretty straightforward setting. All of the pictures were taken at 1440p to try and make it more visible what this setting does. Using the black frame around the rear windscreen, you can see the jagged edges become more pronounced as the setting gets lower. FXAA is another anti-aliasing method. It has 2 settings, on and off. It's used to smooth out the jagged edges on 3D objects. It has a minimal effect and it tends to blur the edge of the objects to achieve what it does. This test was done with MSAA off, so you can see the results easier. If you look at the black edges around the rear windscreen, you can see that when this is turned off, the jagged edges are more pronounced than when it's on. This doesn't apply to just cars, it applies to all 3D objects in the game. Screen space ambient occlusion, or SSAO, controls casting shadows over objects in the game. This doesn't mean shadows of your car over other objects. It's more of an ambient environmental shadows thing. For example, if you have a building that has the sun behind it, that building should have areas on one side where it's darkened or shadowed because of the position of the sun. If you have an object on the sidewalk, for example a hot dog stand, that object should have a shadow underneath it because the area underneath the stand is shaded by the cart. There's 3 settings: ultra, high, and off. I'm only going to show ultra and off because the differences between ultra and high is very minimal. You can barely tell any difference, but you can clearly see the difference between ultra and off. It's a really nice effect that adds quite a high level of realism to a scene. You don't notice how much of an effect it has until you turn it off. The scene becomes very fake looking when you turn this off. I spent quite a lot of time with reflection quality trying to understand what it did. It controls a lot of reflections, but not all. There's 6 options for reflection quality: extreme, ultra, high, medium, low, and very low. First up, it controls the quality of the reflections of things on your car, in the rear windscreen, and things that reflect off the body of your car, but not on the hood of the car. I'll come back to this later, but looking at the examples on screen now, you can see the overhead power lines in the rear window and over the body of the car. Between extreme, ultra, and high, there's very little to no difference in the reflection of the power lines. Medium starts to show lowered quality, low it starts to disappear, and very low it's gone altogether. The next image we'll look at is the reflection of the propeller in the car's rear window. Here's the full-size picture for context. There's a very minimal difference again between extreme, ultra, and high. When we get to medium, we can clearly see that the resolution of the shadow has dropped. It gets worse on low and disappears altogether on very low. On the inside of the car, this setting makes no difference to the reflection in the windscreen until we get to low and very low, where the windscreen reflections are gone completely. Last, on reflection quality, I'll go through the reflections on the hood of the car. I was under the impression that this setting changed the quality of the reflections you see when you're in hood view mode. There's a really nice quality effect where everything you see is mirrored onto the hood of the car. It turns out this setting doesn't control that. When you change this and look at the hood reflections, on the very edge of the hood it has an effect, but not in the middle or for the most of the hood reflection. You can see the plane reflecting on the hood of this car. Now look at the comparison. It has no effect on the main reflection in the middle of the hood. If you look to the sides, as the quality goes down, it does affect the very side part of the hood reflection, but not the main part. It's not a big deal, it's just an observation. World car level of detail sets the detail level on your car and all the other cars in the game. There's 5 options: extreme, ultra, high, medium, and low. Looking at the images, the only real difference I can see between extreme and ultra is that the Corvette badge is flatter on ultra. It really looks like it's raised from the surface on the extreme option. Going down to high, again, that's really the only difference I can see. The level of detail on the car between extreme, ultra, and high are all very similar. When you get down to medium, you can see that the car has less rounded edges. The air vent is lower quality, as are the lights. On low, the air vent is basically gone, and again, there's more of a square look on the edges. The Corvette badge is also lower quality on this setting. Even with the lower quality settings, the cars still look good across all settings. They just look really good the higher you go. Deformable terrain quality. I need to make a correction here because in my previous video I described this option as all of the terrain objects you can break, and that's not correct. This setting controls ground surfaces that change shape when you drive on them. For example, sand. When you're driving on the sandy beach, your car tires will deform the ground and leave tire imprints in the ground. This setting controls how much of this effect you see. There's 5 options: extreme, ultra, high, medium, and off. Extreme definitely has the most pronounced visual effect. You can see there's quite a significant significant level of tire track in the sand compared to ultra. The level of this effect drops off significantly on high and medium when compared to the ultra settings. Off removes the effect altogether. It's a difficult effect to accurately benchmark the performance hit between the different options, so I can't offer any advice on how much of a performance hit it is at this time. SSR, or screen space reflections, controls the reflections that you see on top of water and road surfaces. You generally only see the reflections on the road when it's wet. There's 5 options: ultra, high, medium, low, and off. Looking at ultra versus high, the ultra option definitely has a more realistic reflection look to it. That being said, high is still quite a nice effect. It just doesn't look quite as realistic when you put the two side by side. The reflected objects are also more realistic looking on ultra compared to high. When we drop down to the lower settings, this effect starts to look a bit more fake compared to the higher levels. It's still a moderately nice effect even on low, and remember this is a driving game, so you'll spend most of your time moving and you probably won't really notice a massive difference. Off, however, does look pretty bad. You definitely don't want to use off if you can help it. Lens effects controls the water droplets you see on screen when it's raining or when you drive through water. I haven't found any other effects that's controlled by this setting. Basically any effect on the screen that makes it feel like you're looking through a lens into the game world. There's 4 options: ultra, high, medium, and off. It's a difficult setting to work out the differences because every time you drive through the water, the droplets appear on screen randomly, so you can't sync them up and try and spot the exact differences. I can't spot the difference between ultra, high, or medium. Obviously off turns it off altogether, but it's hard to spot any difference between the other 3. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Shader quality is a little difficult for me to explain without quoting a bunch of information from the internet. I know what the visual effect of shaders are, it's just hard for me to quickly explain it. It basically allows the shading of pixels using different colors and lighting, as opposed to only allowing a pixel to be rendered as a single color with no lighting effect. That's probably an extreme example, but that's roughly what it is. I'm not an expert in the function of shaders. There's 5 options: extreme, ultra, high, medium, and low. This one's really difficult to test because you have to restart the game between changes, and when you restart and come back to the same location, if the lighting of the scene's changed, it can have a dramatic effect on what you see, and it doesn't really give you an accurate comparison. For example, if the sun moves, it can change the scene in a big way. So the best way for me to show you shaders is to show you the difference between the same area on extreme and low, so you can at least see the major differences between the two. There's still going to be some variance in this scene due to the sun location changing between the restarts, but you'll get a rough idea. If you look at the extreme shaders, you can see how the sun shines onto the building and how the shadows cast over the left side of the building. This is a nice example of shaders. The way the intensity of the light changes and then blends into the shadow, and then the shadow also has different shades of shadow, as opposed to just being a flat shadow color. It looks really nice and has a high level of realism to it. Now if you compare extreme to low, on low you can see there's a far less dynamically lit scene. The sunlight on the building is less realistic, the shadow area is more of a flat dark color. Shaders are a big part of why this game often feels like you're looking at a real picture versus a game. Low doesn't exactly look terrible. If you don't put the two side by side, you don't think low looks really bad, it's just that extreme looks really good. Particle effects are things like dust in the sandstorm, the water spray off your tyres when driving on a wet road, confetti in the air, smoke from your tyres, and more. There's 5 options: ultra, high, medium, low, and very low. Starting off with the car intro before each race, this short section before each race uses particles for the confetti, and there's a spray effect as well on the higher settings. You can see the level of confetti decreases as the quality level drops, and it disappears altogether on low and very low. There's also a white air spray effect that you see when the air jet sprays the confetti. This is visible on ultra and high, but you don't see this on medium, low, or very low. Looking inside the sandstorm now, if you look closely at the top 3, there's very little difference between ultra and high. Medium, you can see there is slightly less of the sand effect blowing across the road, and there's less of the leaves that blow across the road on medium. On low, the blowing sand effect is no longer there. The scene in general still feels like it's windy due to the objects moving in the wind, but the particle effects are mostly gone. Very low is the nuclear option here, and all the particle effects get turned off. Moving on to smoke particles, probably one of the most enjoyable effects in the game, smoking up your tyres. The smoke looks great in this game. You can see on Ultra the smoke's very dense, and as you go down the quality levels, the density starts to thin out. I almost feel like Ultra has too much smoke from the tyres. Medium's probably a more realistic feel, but you lose a reasonable amount of eye candy in other areas when you set particles to medium, so I still leave it as high as possible. And then I go smoke up my tyres and forget about realism and just enjoy the moment. Looking at low and very low, there's a clear drop in the effect quality. Low and very low have a similar similar amount of smoke, but the colors on very low changes to be more of a black-grey color. The smoke at these levels sort of puts out in small clouds with gaps in between. It definitely feels like more of an artificial effect compared to the higher settings. But if this is all your graphics card can handle, then better to have this effect than no smoke at all. Another example of confetti particles with the airspray effect, I synchronized the first three so you should be able to see the effect in sync to see the differences. There's actually 3 different particle type effects in this scene. The confetti, the airspray, and there's also a very minor sand blowing across the road at times. On Ultra, you can see the airspray from the confetti dispenser, and there's also a higher level of confetti that gets sent out. If you look closely at the road, there's also an occasional dust cloud that blows across the screen. Going down to high, all the same effects are there, it's just a slightly lower amount of confetti, and the dust clouds across the road are slightly smaller and less frequent than on Ultra. When you drop this down to medium, the air pressure effect when the confetti shoots out is gone. All 3 videos are in sync, and you can see this difference if you pause right when the confetti shoots out. There's also a drop in the amount of confetti compared to the 2 higher settings. The dust clouds across the screen are basically gone as well. Every now and then you see a slight dusty effect, but it's hard to notice. When this is set to low or very low, all of the particle effects in this scene seem to be completely turned off. There's no confetti or dust clouds. Before I get to the last setting, if you like this video or find it helpful, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and click the notification bell so you won't miss any future videos. Now last and probably least, we have RTX or ray tracing. RTX has 3 options: high, medium, and low. This effect is only available in the Forza library. So when you're inside the library option in the menu viewing your car, that's the only time this effect is applied. It's not applied at any other point in the game. It's hard to see the differences here. One difference I noticed was the discs on the brakes. If you pause when all 3 are lined up, there's a very nice mirror effect on the discs compared to when it's off, where it's not visible. I feel like RTX is used very minimally here. Maybe it will be more visible with different cars. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, or am I missing something here? So that does it for another Forza Horizon 5 settings video. Hope you enjoyed watching and it gives you a better understanding of what each of the settings do in the game and helps you to configure your game visuals to the level you like. I want to say a big thanks to all the people who subscribed and left comments after my last graphics video. I really appreciate the support and hope I can continue to make content that you enjoy and find useful. I'll be making more technical videos in the future for Horizon 5 and other games, and there'll be some driving videos in between there as well. If there's any visual elements in the game that you know about that I missed, feel free to post them in the comments, and if we can get enough together, then I'll make a part 2 to this video. Have fun playing Horizon 5. It's an amazing game visually and play-wise. I'm not 100% sure what I'll do for the next video yet. I might try and incorporate all of this information into a better presented and more relevant performance tuning guide for various cards, or I may do something different. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.